Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Varsity Aces Live. My name is Darren Cooper, high school sports columnist for NorthJersey.com. And this week, I'm joined by my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Greg Mattura, who's a little shy, said his hair is a little long now, but we won't blame him. And also, our very special guest this week, New Jersey Football Coaches Association Commissioner, longtime football coach in North Jersey and parts here and there, Mr. John Jacob. Jake, how are you tonight?
Very good. How are you?
Good, my friend. And Mr. Mattura, how are you?
I'm not too bad.
That's good to know. Jake, I think the first thing we should probably ask is kind of explain to us what the NJ FCA is and who they are.
The NJCAA is it's our state coaches association, the New Jersey Football Coaches Association. It was established in 1984 by a lot of legendary coaches that were first involved. You're talking about the Mike Mielos of the world, and a lot of guys from South Jersey, Central Jersey were involved. Marcus Borden, the names go on. Rick Mance. A lot of these guys kind of laid down the foundation for where we are now. So, basically they were a group that decided that we needed a, collaborative group of professionals to kind of see if we can, help sort of set the tone and kind of navigate the landscape of football. Realizing it's not a governing body, but if we could work in conjunction with the, NJCAA to kind of just promote the best interests of football and, kind of work alongside the football community. And our membership has really grown strong over the years. And, we continue to have a real good working relationship with, leadership across the state, athletic directors, and the NJSAA.
And so right now we're dealing with some unprecedented times, Jake, and we're not going to ask you what's going to happen because you don't know what's going to happen. But what steps has the NJFDA taken to kind of deal with these unprecedented times and the start of football season? Everybody's still starting to think about that in August and down the road.
Well, I mean, what we've been doing is just trying to, do our best and due diligence to plan for scenarios. So, about a month ago, we started some dialogue with, the heads of conferences around the state, ADs that we've built relationships with over the years, just to say, hey, these are some thoughts that we might want to look at, some models we might want to look at moving forward. From there, we kind of took it to our own executive committee, to start brainstorming a little bit about scenarios that would entail, certain kind of benchmark start dates, and then thought about the challenges that would come with each one of those potential start dates, and then basically started mapping out potential models for plans. That's what we've been doing on that end. Obviously, none of us are can speculate as to what exactly is going to happen, but the way we see it is, you don't plan for easy stuff. You plan for the hard things. We want to be prepared for, the worst case scenarios. And if we end up with a situation where, we're back in July, or we're back, at a time where it's not going to really disrupt the regular season, then that's great. We get back to business.
John, I know you had your online meetings with those coaches on Thursday and Friday. The potential start dates, August 1st, August 17th, and September 1st. Could you take us inside that meeting and let us know what other concerns or information came out of that meeting? Can you share with us?
Sure. First, I'd preface it by saying those dates, those were just benchmark dates that we collaboratively came up with. In other words, those didn't, they weren't made arbitrarily, but they're not any type of official dates. We just thought it would be prudent to use those three dates because those three dates could potentially will start once you get that late out of July, it would start to potentially affect the regular season. In other words, you get to an August 17th day, you're talking about you're going to have to find a way, you're going to have to omit weeks of the season. An August 1st start, we'd probably be okay, but certainly we might want to adjust the preseason. So I just think it's important to say that was the thought process behind those dates. To answer your question directly about what was discussed, basically there was questions about the autonomy of conferences to be able to use the regular season weeks in a manner that would best suit their conference, which we agreed would be the best approach. In other words, if the Super Football Conference said that, hey, we're going to omit these weeks, and then in, say, week 10, we're going to insert week 3, for example. And the short conferences.
Talking about doing. Kind of like what the NFL was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the short conference might say, hey, wait a minute, we need that week 10 to insert this week. Yeah. And a lot of that would have to do with, a really good job of thoroughly investigating all the schedules in your conference, kind of seeing where you have the least amount of buys, and then kind of insert that weekend. And then there, other discussion, made reference to, conferences trying to help each other out. In other words, if there's a team that misses a game due to a bye within those weeks where it's already a condensed season, maybe we can hook them up with a team that has a bye in another conference. So, regardless of what happens, if we start to get into a place where it disrupts the season, it's going to call for a lot of creativity and a lot of collaboration across the state.
Okay, now the state gave official permission via a release Friday night that coaches are allowed to have virtual contact with their players. Was there any discussion during the meeting about the coaches talking about the morale of their kids as it relates to only being able to be in contact with them online?
Very little at that meeting, because the primary focus was kind of the scheduling models. But I have a lot of dialogue with a lot of coaches all across the state. Just about various topics. And a lot of times it lends itself into some casual conversations because, I feel like, listen, I learn a lot from talking to a lot of coaches, and I'm curious to hear what they're saying. So to answer your question about that, I think for a lot of us, our biggest concern is, their routines. And a lot of us I've talked about this with a lot of coaches, and even as an educator for a lot of teachers, I think all of us are concerned about disruptive sleeping patterns. I think that's probably one of our biggest concerns. The fact that, now that the weather's a little bit better, I think it'll help. But the fact that, for a lot of kids, it's easier to kind of, sleep in real late and spend as much of their time actually, coming to the realization of this quarantine in the daytime than it is to kind of, be up late at night gaming, finishing up your homework. I think it's probably, for a kid's standpoint, it's probably easier to accept during that time. So I think this disruptive sleeping patterns, the nutrition, I think that's the stuff that concerns us, the most. And then obviously on a large scale with all kids, it's their mental state of mind, their mental health. I think we're all concerned about that.
I tell you, Jake, it sounds like you're in my house, because I got that with my 3 kids, like bad nutrition, staying up late, popcorn at 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
I hear you. That has to be a pressing concern for all the coaches. Are there any other models, I guess, we can look at? Are there any other states? I mean, we're so densely populated and we're so dearly impacted by COVID-19 kind of compared to other areas of the country. Can we look at other states for examples of what they're going to do in the fall?
Yeah, we're gonna. About a week ago, I was through a common friend. I was given some contact information for the Pennsylvania Commissioner of Football Coaches Association.
Okay.
I'd like to start some dialogue with him, and at some point, I'd kind of like to bring both of our executive committees together, because even like we talked in a pre-show, I think so much of this really does is incumbent on what states are doing regionally. I think that for sports, we'll probably take the same approach that we did with society. We kind of acted together. New York, Pennsylvania, the tri-state area, Delaware, New Jersey. So, and not only that, you just have, you have more eyes on the model. You have, just more brains at the table, So I think for us regionally, like I told you, we were talking pre-show, I've seen what other states are doing in the Midwest.
Yeah.
I know California
here, but that doesn't necessarily work here.
Yeah, it's not going to help. Indiana put out their statement that they're going to start July 1st, but that's based on what's going on in that region of the country, so I think regionally will help us.
I guess my follow-up is if we did hypothetically have to start later than we wanted to, August 17th or September 1st, what happens to those week 0, week 1, and week 2 games? Because as I know you are well aware, Coach, we don't have a lot of time in December to play extra games, and we could talk about playoffs and for a long time too. So I mean, who kind of would have to settle that fiasco? You alluded to a little bit earlier about slotting, weeks in. Who would end up dealing with that?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the NJSAA is going to be the final decision maker. But I think that we're certainly going to have the ability to offer our input along with, the athletic directors.
Yeah.
So, to answer that, where do those weeks go? It depends upon how many we lose.
Yeah.
I mean, if, if you're talking about any of those models, there's going to be the ones that Greg referred to early, there's going to be weeks lost. There's no way around that. But, even with those models that the dates, that benchmark dates that Greg referenced, even for the September 25th one, which right now is the worst case scenario we projected, but listen, it like you said, it's a fluid situation. It could get worse. We could find that it's October. We could find it it's July. We could find that it's October. I think that right now, with any one of those models, at minimum, we could provide a pretty substantial season and pretty much guarantee all teams, a minimum of 9 to 10 games, regardless of what happens with those dates being the potential worst case scenarios.
What kind of talk was there about the playoffs? Was there a latest possible starting date in which there could still be some type of playoff?
I mean, the latest one that we dealt with, Greg, was the 25th. I think, and coaches did bring this up, and I think it's valid, basically kind of that, the question of, when does it come to a point where you have to kind of abort the playoffs and just give the kids a chance to play? I think there's, legitimacy to that question. Personally, I think that, if we can make it so that they're not mutually exclusive and we could preserve the playoffs and still provide a substantial season for all teams, I think that would be the goal. I do think there comes that breaking point where, that's the line of demarcation where it's, what that date is. I don't know for sure, Greg, but I tell you, if you got into October, I think that would be a legitimate part of the discussion. I do.
I understand also that there was some discussion or some interest in maybe expanding the playoffs to allow in more teams to kind of make things a little bit easier if there are complications.
Yeah, that was and full transparency, that's something that we've discussed. We floated out to ADs as well. There's a rationale behind it. In a potential model where, if we felt that we were in a situation where we were limited, like you said, like you got down to September 25th, there's going to have to be a lot of work done by athletic directors, and their jobs are difficult with regards to scheduling. So, you're going to have that situation. You're going to have a shortened sample size of games, which when you have a shortened sample size of games, that's going to dramatically impact the accuracy of a UPR, and the accuracy of your strength index. So to kind of alleviate those pressures, and then a team worrying about the games that they're going to get, and then and AD having to schedule different teams together just to be able to create a comprehensive schedule, by allowing, there's a model in which you can allow all teams into playoffs, and then the following week go down to your 8. And then that week could still be another week where teams that lost could pick up another game.
Right. So double bracketed. Yeah.
Well, there was discussion of both.
The losers go that way.
There's discussion of both. The bracket made for what would be the equivalent of an NIT type situation. that was discussed as a possibility, not necessarily, it was certainly something we said that people would be open to when the time comes, to actually kind of hammer out the details. But, that could be a case where, you could do that. You would alleviate the pressure of athletic directors having to create schedules and modify schedules. You'd alleviate the pressure of coaches being concerned about who's on their schedule now because they know they're making it.
Yeah.
And then also you're addressing the volatility of the virus itself in the event there's a quarantine that knocks a team out for 2 weeks or something like that. So, that's a practical solution. And in that situation, you could end up having a very substantial season, maybe going a week over, which I think Jack has already mentioned publicly, that if that's something, as per Sandy, if that's something we would have to do, we would do it. And then at that point, the NJSA would make a decision if they wanted to just leave it at sections and omit the regional championship or go one more week for the regional championship.
So, Blake, I moved up here a long time ago, just a guy from Louisiana, and I've written this so many times, and we've talked about this. Why don't we have state champions in public schools?
Yeah, it's a question we all ask.
Yeah.
I think the time is. I think the time is coming. I do.
How big a role will your organization take in shaping what that model might look like down the road? Because now, at least, it's not going to happen. It's not happening in 2020. It's not going to happen in 2021 because of the 2-year schedule cycle. So the nearest would be we were going to have some vote, but that's all thrown out the window.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a vote eventually.
Yes, there'll be a vote, of course. So the nearest would be 2022. I'm kind of curious to know if conversations are already going on, privately. You don't have to share but if conversations are already going on by your organization and what it could look like.
Yeah, there were, and a lot of them, for us, we have executive committee meetings where they're kind of, closed door sessions, and we have our open general membership. At our last general membership meeting at Rutgers, it was discussed. To answer your question, we would want it to really be, the truest representation and reflection of, what the consensus of our association would be. What that model would be. And I do think we would our input would certainly be elicited by the athletic directors in the NJSA. I feel pretty confident about that.
Can we make Thanksgiving work still though, Jake? Because
yes.
Yeah, right. People always want to say it's either or, but it doesn't have to be either or, right?
In fact, that's probably one of the best, preconditions you can place on these types of negotiations and talks, because I think it just puts people at ease. I would say that, unequivocally that would be the case. That no, we wouldn't sponsor a model that placed Thanksgiving teams in a compromise. We wouldn't do that. They're our fellow coaches. We wouldn't do that to our coaches, and I'm confident the NJSA feels the same way.
Now, I think it's a great idea that you're allowing flexibility within each league. If the Super Football Conference wants to do it one way and the North Jersey Interscholastic Conference wants to do it another way, giving them flexibility if someone wants to just stick to their schedule or someone wants to reinvent their schedule once they know when the season is going to start. I think that's a terrific idea. But has there been any discussion about how potentially difficult it's going to be to then bring these different leagues, which may have different ideas about how to do their leagues, bring them together into a playoff format?
I think the theory is basically that we would obviously, yes, to answer your question, we would have to agree on the playoff format, which there seems to be pretty good traction with those. There seems to be a pretty there's a common agreement amongst the ADs that we've spoken to that head up the conferences. They feel that would be a pretty good approach. And the theory being during the regular season is basically, hey, short conference, do what you have to do. We'll meet you in the playoffs. That's kind of the theory behind it. But at the same time, there's a lot of bright guys running these conferences. And they're, they really understand that they're going to have to work together. And I definitely think that there's a willingness for them to do that. to try to service each other to maximize the schedules.
Blake, Jake, I got one last thing I want to talk to you about, which is Coach Shiano over at Rutgers. And you kind of became a little bit of an internet sensation with something you said about Rutgers hiring Coach Shiano. You made a remark that how much the high school coaches really wanted to see him come back. Were you shocked at how big that comment grew and grew? You're famous. You're a kingmaker, Jake. You know that.
I don't know about that, but no, I guess I didn't at the time. I had a couple of media outlets reach out to me. I didn't think much of it at the time. I really believe that was kind of the pulse of a lot of coaches. You guys to relive that. I mean, it was a frustrating time. To kind of let it was more about the process and the procedure and what we kind of viewed as a little bit of a lack of preparedness. That's what it was.
And how is has Coach Shiano been a part of the organization? Has he come and talked to NJFCA since he's been on?
Yeah, he's great. We had a great relationship with him before he left. So many of us as coaches, I've had players play for him. So many of us as coaches have known him for a long time before he left. And when he came back, he was real gracious to come, to the first meeting that he was officially back on, made time, spent a lot of time individually with coaches out in the hallway, didn't run back into his office. He's been gracious with the Hale Center before the quarantine, kind of giving us, any space we needed. He hosted a small meeting with some members of our executive committee to kind of welcome us and just kind of, talk about some initiatives, that we could start thinking about collaboratively moving forward. And, we were very excited about that stuff, the clinic and, some other events and socials. And then all of a sudden, we had this. So,
I forgot one of the very first things I want to talk about is, and I totally forgot, was the NJFCA is running clinics virtually, aren't you guys? You'll have real Don Smolin was back. I mean, how good is that? How good has that been received, Jake?
It's been great. We and I think that our guys really appreciate. I've had a lot of college coaches reach out to me to be involved, and they're great. The college coaches are great, and they're guys that we have relationships with. But we're having so many high school guys. The feedback we're getting is how much our high school guys appreciate hearing other high school coaches.
Yeah.
There's a level of familiarity. They feel like they're dealing with the same, more similar challenges. So the response has been overwhelming. We've had anywhere from 60 to 100 guys every Monday night for clinics. We invite youth coaches to join us as well.
How about talking to the press? What about one of the dealing with the press and guys like me and Greg? You
guys are more than welcome to come to any clinic you'd like.
All right, Jake, thank you so much. Mr. Mattura, you got anything else?
Of course I do. I'm like Columbo. I can keep asking questions until he pleads guilty and admits that he did it. It's my understanding that some school districts have already said that they will not let their kids gather until September 1st. How would that impact a season where some students may be allowed to return and have practice in August and others are not allowed to return until September 1st?
I think it's a great question. It's a real challenging one to answer. My preference would be to answer this one not as the NJFCA commissioner. I'll just give you my opinion because I don't think it would be fair to offer an opinion like this on behalf of an entire association. So I would give you my personal opinion is I think that's going to be something that the NJSA is going to have to look at, and that's a lot of it's going to be about their comfort level. If I was the one who had to, preside over a decision like that, I think the question becomes how many schools are doing that. I think that's probably the most important aspect of that decision-making process. And the reason why I say that, Greg, if you told me that, you're talking about 300 semi-schools that play football. If you told me that three schools said that that was going to be what they were going to do. My personal feeling was that you can't necessarily hold a whole state hostage kind of based on the decision-making process of a few schools. I respect any school district's decisions that they make that they feel are in the best interest of their community and their kids. But personally, I just don't feel that. I think the real question that I would throw back at you is how many schools? If you're talking about 100 schools, now that's something substantial. I think that's something and ultimately, listen, it's not going to be my decision. I'm just giving you my opinion, my thought process. If I was the one to preside over it, I think the most fundamental aspect of that question is how many of these schools are we dealing with? If we're dealing with a couple,
I think this is one of the great ideas about giving each league their own flexibility. I see there being a lot of adjustments and schedules. Maybe the team that you thought you were going to play in your first game, you're now going to have to push back into later in the season. I mean, and you're going to just try to match up two schools that are able to play, hopefully give people enough time to review film and prepare for each other. But there's going to be a lot of changes on the fly is what I see. When is the next meeting of the NJFCA, and what is already on the agenda for that meeting?
Well, we're going to basically our next meeting is going to kind of be some feedback, because you got that the presentation. We had a presentation that was prepared. We shared it with our coaches. So our from an executive committee standpoint, it was basically like, here's going to be the talk. Here's what we're going to discuss for that past meeting. Let's explain it. Let's go through it. Then let's take a couple of weeks to kind of, let everybody process and digest it. And at the same time, I know that there's a few individual conference, like coaches conference meetings. There's actually one tonight, I believe, for the super conference where some coaches are meeting. The other leagues are going to do the same, the Big Central. So I would say in about 3 weeks, we're going to reconvene. Our executive committee is going to reconvene in about a week and a half to 2 weeks.
For those of us who love high school football, and there's many people out there across the country, what would you hope would sort of be an ideal scenario for New Jersey to be able to come back and have a respectable football season in the fall?
Ideal. I mean, ideal. I'd be back on June 4th, 14th. But obviously, I don't know anything, but I can't see that happening simply because of the fact that we're not in school. I can't see the Commissioner of Education, allowing kids to congregate for sports when we're not allowed to do it for, educational purposes. So I'm just being realistic about that. Listen, if it slowed down and they told us we can get back at it in July, I mean, I think we'd all be in heaven, including you. I think that if, any one of those other benchmark dates will make work for sure. They're not ideal, but they'll make work. So, at this point, what would make me happy is if we'd be able to produce a substantial football season for our kids.
I know I'm suffering from sports separation anxiety right now. I've spent entirely too much time in my kitchen cleaning it up, and I'd really like to get away from that and look forward to seeing some sports in the fall. Me and you both.
All right. Jake, thank you so much for your time today. Very interesting. I'm not going to blow smoke, but the NJFCA has done great things for high school football in New Jersey. You've done a great job leading that organization, and I appreciate your candor and your honesty and your time hanging out here tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you very much for answering all my questions. I very much appreciate it as well, John.
Thank you, Greg. No problem.
All right, and that'll wrap things up here on Varsity Aces Live. My name is Darren Cooper, and remember, let the players play, the coaches coach, and the officials officiate. And let the Varsity Aces tell you what you need to know. Goodbye, everybody.